I'm Daphne, and all my life I'd been drawn to the silent majesty of Redwood Vale. Its towering trunks and fragrant needles always offered solace until the night I discovered a hidden ritual site deep within its shadows. My mother used to say I had a knack for finding trouble, but I never imagined how right she'd be. One moonlit evening, I hiked beyond the usual trails, lured by a faint humming that seemed both soothing and sinister. The deeper I ventured, the older the trees became, their bark scarred by deep gashes. I spotted strange symbols etched into the wood, and with each step forward, my apprehension grew. Still, I pressed on, curiosity overriding caution. I eventually stumbled upon an overgrown clearing where robed figures formed a circle around a colossal statue carved from a single redwood trunk. The statue portrayed a woman with elongated limbs, her expression twisted in agony. My heart fluttered in disbelief as I watched the group sway in unison, their humming vibrating the still night air. The leader stepped forward, hands raised toward the statue's face. With a trembling voice, they invoked a name I didn't recognize, a name that pulsed in my mind like a heartbeat. The statue's carved eyes then glowed faintly, and a creeping unease took hold of me. I should have turned and run, but I was spellbound, locked in place by dread and fascination. Suddenly, the humming escalated into a chorus of discordant notes. The statue's wooden surface rippled, as if alive. A shrill crack echoed through the clearing, and the statue's torso split open, revealing a hollow interior. From this cavity emerged a vile stench of decay, and something writhed inside, scraping against the wood in desperate fury. The robed figures reached into the opening, each withdrawing a handful of writhing, glistening centipedes. I froze, nausea gripping my insides. One by one, they placed the centipedes onto their tongues before swallowing them whole. The leader turned toward me, as though sensing my presence, and I realized my horrific mistake. I had intruded upon a forbidden communion. In a surge of panic, I attempted to step back, but my foot caught on a root. I crashed to the ground, the sound echoing in the hushed clearing. The robed figures whipped around, and their murmuring gave way to frantic whispers. My mind screamed at me to flee, but adrenaline pinned me in place. Then the leader raised a staff, and a scorching red light erupted from its tip, illuminating the entire clearing. A wave of heat slammed into me, and the statue's eyes blazed like embers. I felt an immense pressure building in my chest, making it impossible to breathe. The robed assembly advanced, arms outstretched, as if beckoning me to join their ghastly rite. My vision blurred, spots dancing before my eyes. I knew I had only seconds to break free. Summoning every ounce of courage, I rolled to my knees and bolted into the darkness. The forest seemed to conspire against me. Roots snagged my ankles, branches tore at my skin. Behind me, the chanting resumed, louder and more urgent. My lungs burned as I sprinted through the maze of ancient trunks, the leader's voice echoing through the shadows, promising retribution. At last I spotted a faint glow from my abandoned campsite. I lunged for the lantern, nearly collapsing. In relief, the chanting faded, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest itself watched me leave, disappointed I had escaped. Even now, I wake in cold sweats, recalling the red glow, the splitting wood, and the unholy communion. I've learned that Redwood Vale holds a dark heartbeat, one that resonates with those who dare venture too far. I left that cursed clearing, but the memory of it still clings to me like sap, a sticky reminder that some secrets are better left buried in the silence of the trees. My name is Lawrence, and I was a skeptic before I stepped into the cursed reaches of Ravenshade Woods. People in town warned me about sinister rites carried out under the old oaks, but I dismissed them as tall tales. I was a historian, after all, accustomed to separating fact from folklore. How wrong I was. I ventured in alone, armed with historical texts and a stubborn disbelief. The forest canopy was so dense that daylight struggled to penetrate, rendering the atmosphere dim even at noon. The air was thick, smelling of damp earth and something sulphurous. I pressed on, each footstep accompanied by the soft rustle of dead leaves and the distant caw of a lone crow. After hours of trudging, I discovered a stone archway engraved with cryptic symbols. This structure matched old records describing a gateway used in secret druidic rituals centuries ago. My heart raced with a mix of excitement and trepidation. I carefully stepped beneath the arch. The temperature dropped instantly, and a dense fog materialized around me as if summoned by unseen hands. In the clearing beyond, I found a circle of stones arranged around a crude altar. Faded runes marked each stone's surface, radiating an unsettling energy I couldn't explain. As I approached, a sudden gust of wind extinguished the sunlight, leaving me enveloped in shadow. Then I heard a low, rhythmic chant from somewhere, just beyond the fog. I squinted, trying to make out silhouettes in the gloom. Slowly, hooded figures emerged from the tree line, their voices weaving an ominous lullaby. One by one, they encircled the altar, each holding a torch whose flame burned a deep, unnatural green. The color flickered across their faces, revealing hollow cheeks and eyes that sparkled with deranged fervor. They placed their torches in iron brackets, illuminating an ancient tome resting atop the altar. The tome's cover was made of a leathery material I dared not identify. My skepticism warred with an instinctive dread as I crept closer. The lead figure opened the book, finger tracing lines of text in a language I couldn't recognize. The chanting intensified, each syllable hammering into my mind. Suddenly, the circle parted to reveal an emaciated creature shackled to a wooden stake. Its sunken eyes darted frantically, pleading for mercy. My stomach churned at the sight of raw wounds covering its body. Without hesitation, the lead figure plunged a dagger into the creature's chest. A tortured scream pierced the night, and the chanting surged to a fevered pitch. To my horror, the blood that gushed from the creature's wound glowed an eerie green, matching the torchlight. The ground trembled, and an otherworldly roar echoed through the clearing. The shackled being collapsed, but its lifeblood seeped into the altar, making the runes burn with a flickering luminescence. I realized I was witnessing an ancient sacrifice meant to rouse something best left dormant. Unable to remain silent, I let out an involuntary gasp. Every hooded head snapped toward me. The chanting ceased, replaced by an unnerving silence. My heart thundered in my chest as they advanced, torches raised. I turned and sprinted into the fog, branches whipping my face. I could still hear their footsteps pounding behind me, closing in like a pack of wolves. I didn't stop running until I burst through the archway again. The air warmed, and the fog lifted as if a veil had been removed. Gasping for breath, I stumbled onto the main trail. Though I escaped with my life, my nights remain haunted by green flames and unholy chants. I abandoned my skepticism that Daysome legends, I learned, are grounded in nightmarish truths. I left the forest with more questions than answers. But the terror in my dreams tells me that knowledge sometimes comes at a horrifying cost. My name is Harris, and if I'd known the price of my ambition, I'd never have filmed that documentary in the heart of Harrowroot Forest. I was desperate for a breakthrough project, and local legends about forbidden ceremonies seemed like the perfect angle. My small crew and I arrived at dusk, camera gear rattling in the back of our van, each of us jittery with a blend of excitement and dread. We followed a narrow, overgrown trail into the forest's depths. The deeper we went, the quieter everything became. No bird calls, no rustling animals, just our own breathing and the crunch of twigs underfoot. The towering pines stood like silent sentinels, blocking out the evening sky. Every so often, I caught a fleeting glimpse of movement among the trees, but when I looked directly, nothing was there. Eventually, we discovered a small clearing, where the ground was littered with withered flowers and charred bits of cloth. It felt like we'd stumbled upon the remnants of a forgotten ceremony. My cameraman, Joel, began filming, panning across the unsettling evidence. Suddenly, a chill breeze swept through, carrying with it the faint echo of distant chanting. The hairs on my neck bristled. Compelled to investigate, we moved toward the sound. Dusk surrendered to night, and the moon's glow pierced the forest canopy in thin, silver ribbons. We paused at the edge of another clearing. There, a large stone circle enclosed a patch of blackened soil. In the center stood a figure draped in ragged robes, arms raised to the heavens. Something about the posture radiated an unearthly menace. With a surge of journalistic zeal, I signaled Joel to record. As soon as we stepped forward, the figure whirled around. A pale face emerged from the hood, a face without eyes, just smooth skin stretched across empty sockets. A rasping sound emanated from its lipless mouth, like an attempt to speak, but forming no coherent words. A wave of dread washed over me, and I realized we had trespassed on something profoundly evil. Before we could react, the figure dropped to its knees and pounded the ground with both fists. Dark fissures spread across the stone circle, seeping a thick, tar-like substance. The chanting we'd heard earlier grew louder, though no one else was present. It was as if the forest itself had joined the ritual. My crew and I stood paralyzed, cameras rolling, hearts pounding. Then, from within the cracks, twisted vines emerged, writhing as though they possessed a life of their own. They latched onto the robed figure, wrapping around its limbs in a grotesque embrace. To our horror, the figure began to laugh, a shrill, maddening cackle that echoed through the clearing. The vines burrowed into its flesh, and instead of blood, a black sap oozed out, steaming in the cool air. Suddenly, the vines lurched in our direction. Joel was the first to scream. One vine ensnared his leg, dragging him violently across the ground. I yelled for everyone to run, but chaos erupted. Two of my crew bolted back into the forest, while I tried to help Joel free himself. The vine's grip was impossibly strong, and a foul odor emanated from it, a nauseating blend of decay and sulfur. Desperate, I grabbed a nearby rock and hammered at the vine until it slackened its hold. Joel gasped in pain, his ankle, likely, broken. Supporting him, I half-limped, half-dragged him toward the edge of the clearing. Over my shoulder, I saw the robed figure convulsing under the vines, face upturned to the moon. The chanting intensified into a frenzied wail, as if the entire forest was screaming in unison. We escaped into the trees, stumbling over roots and branches until we found the van. The others were already inside, eyes wide with terror. Without a word, we sped away. Later, when I reviewed the footage, it was all static. The camera had failed to record the most horrifying moments. Even so, that night remains etched into my soul, a constant reminder that some stories aren't meant to be told. I learned too late that true evil doesn't always hide in shadows. Sometimes it calls to you, whispering promises you're too eager to hear. I remember how the cold wind pierced my jacket as I trudged deeper into the wilderness with Adam, my longtime friend. The trail was obscure, barely lit by our flickering flashlights. Towering pines blocked the moonlight, casting elongated shadows that seemed to move on their own. We weren't simply camping this time. We had heard rumors of a clandestine group holding a ritual in these woods. Our curiosity outweighed our caution, and so we continued in silence, feeling the weight of the night. I first noticed the footprints near a gnarled oak, prints too large and spaced too closely to belong to any normal walker. They led us onto a narrower path, where we found unsettling clues: melted candle wax hardened over roots, small wooden effigies hanging from branches, and cryptic markings carved into the bark. Each step felt like a silent invitation into a realm we were never meant to enter. Adam and I exchanged uneasy looks, but pressed on. Soon, we reached a clearing bathed in a ghostly glow. In the center stood a crudely fashioned altar made of stone slabs, surrounded by half-burnt black candles. A stagnant odor hung in the air, akin to rotting leaves mixed with something metallic. My heartbeat thumped against my ribcage. We were on the brink of discovering something horrifying, yet some twisted sense of fascination held us captive. My throat felt dry, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from that altar. Suddenly, I saw movement at the edge of the clearing, a line of hooded figures, each grasping a thick wooden staff. They marched in eerie unison, forming a circle around the altar. One figure, taller than the rest, lifted a ceremonial dagger carved with strange symbols. The chanting that followed resonated through the darkness, a guttural melody that rattled my nerves. I wanted to run, but found myself rooted to the spot, paralyzed by dread and awe. As the chant grew louder, the shadows beneath the figures began to writhe, as though they were alive. Adam tugged at my sleeve, signaling that we should leave, but part of me needed to see more to understand the forbidden practice unfolding before my eyes. That was when the tall figure raised its arms, revealing pale, skeletal hands. A wave of cold air struck us, and I saw the candle flames flicker wildly, as though responding to an unseen force. In one terrifying instant, the dagger plunged into a small wooden effigy on the altar. An agonized howl erupted from the circle, echoing through the trees. The effigy snapped open, revealing a blood-soaked scrap of cloth. I realized, with a bolt of horror, that this was no mere performance. This was a summoning, a call to something ancient and malevolent lurking in the shadows. My stomach twisted as I fought the urge to vomit. Suddenly, a piercing cry tore through the night. A monstrous silhouette emerged from the darkness, eyes glowing like embers. It towered over the robed figures, and they dropped to their knees in reverence. My mind reeled at the sight of this abomination, part stag, part decaying human form. Slowly, it turned its gaze toward me. Even from a distance, I felt its hunger, a primal urge that demanded sacrifice. Adam clutched my arm, and I heard his panicked breath. Without warning, the beast lunged forward, snatching one of the acolytes in its jaws. Screams shattered the ritual's rhythm, and the hooded circle dissolved into chaos. Adam and I snapped out of our trance and sprinted back into the woods, branches clawing at our clothes. We fled blindly, fear fueling our every step. Even now, I can still hear that unearthly roar echoing through the pines. I sometimes wake at night, drenched in sweat, convinced it's stalking me still, hungry for another offering. In the aftermath, word of the forest's malevolent presence spread quietly among the locals. Some whispered of cursed land and an ancient spirit that demanded blood. Others dismissed the tales as hysteria. Adam and I never spoke openly about what we witnessed, but the memory grew into a silent wedge between us. My nights became fraught with nightmares, visions of hooded congregants chanting under a pale moon, shadows warping into horrors beyond comprehension. Now, whenever I pass that old trail, I sense a watchful presence lingering among the trees. My flashlight beam reveals nothing but dense foliage, yet I know better. The forest has eyes, and it remembers those who witness its forbidden rites. Though my rational mind urges me to forget, my conscience won't let me ignore the truth. We disrupted something that night, something that thrives on fear, and I fear it may one day call me back. I pray it never finds me, but in my bones, I sense it's only a matter of time. My name is Evelyn, and I once believed no secret was too dark to uncover. That arrogant curiosity led me to a remote forest near Blackwood Creek, where rumors spoke of cryptic gatherings. I packed a bag armed with nothing but a camera and my blind determination. The twisted pines seemed to whisper warnings in the night air as I ventured into the gloom, guided only by the faint hush of distant chanting. I should have turned back the moment I found a scattering of bleached bones, near a moss-covered rock. Instead, I pressed on, adrenaline coursing through my veins. Every branch seemed to scratch at my jacket like a bony finger, urging me to reverse course. I told myself it was just my imagination, a side effect of my single-minded pursuit of the unknown. Little did I know, I was stepping into a realm where human eyes rarely dared to linger. I reached a hidden hollow, ringed by ancient oaks. My heart hammered against my chest as I crouched behind a fallen log to observe. In the clearing stood a circle of hooded individuals, their bodies swaying in a rhythmic dance around a central totem carved from a colossal tree trunk. The totem bore a faceless visage with hollow eyes and a gaping mouth, as though perpetually crying out in silent agony. A single red candle flickered at its base. The chanting was low and hypnotic, punctuated by the snapping of twigs. One figure lifted a clay bowl, passing it around as others dipped their hands inside. Through my camera lens, I saw a thick, dark substance coat their fingers. Then they smeared this foul liquid onto the totem's wooden face. The sight made my stomach churn. An unnatural hush descended, and for a moment, the forest itself seemed to hold its breath. I nearly gasped aloud when the totem's carved eyes appeared to glisten, as if reacting to the vile offering. My pulse quickened, and I struggled to steady my shaking hands. The hooded assembly sank to their knees, chanting a phrase I couldn't decipher. Waves of cold air rippled through the hollow, sending leaves spiraling upward. I felt an immediate, primal terror. Something beyond my comprehension was about to manifest, suddenly. The totem's wooden mouth began to move, releasing a guttural moan that resonated through the clearing. My camera slipped from my grip, but I caught it before it hit the ground. The worshippers prostrated themselves, pressing their foreheads into the damp earth. My mind raced as I questioned my own sanity. Could Wood truly groan like a living creature? The moan built into a roar, shaking the surrounding trees. As the roar subsided, the lead figure rose and turned directly toward my hiding place. Though I couldn't see their face under the hood, I felt the weight of their gaze. The group pivoted in unison, silent yet menacing. My breath caught in my throat as they began to advance toward the fallen log, slow and deliberate steps crunching on the dried leaves. I realized that witnessing their secret had condemned me. Panic erupted within me, but my legs refused to move. I recalled stories of people vanishing in these woods, their possessions found near strange markings etched into the bark. Now, I feared I would become just another legend, to be whispered about in local taverns. Gathering a final burst of courage, I bolted from my hiding spot, clutching my camera like a talisman. The hooded figures broke into a chase. I sprinted blindly, branches tearing at my face, footfalls pounded behind me, closer with every frantic heartbeat. I dared not look back. The forest was a labyrinth of shadows that seemed to warp and shift, guiding me deeper into its clutches. A single misstep sent me tumbling down a slope, smashing my knee against a jagged stone. Pain shot through my leg, but I forced myself up, limping onward as a shrill cry echoed behind me. At last, I stumbled upon an old ranger's cabin. I threw myself against the door, sobbing in relief when it gave way. No one was inside, but I slammed the lock shut and sank to the floor. Through the window, I caught one final glimpse of a hooded figure standing at the tree line, head tilted in silent warning. That night, I vowed never to chase such darkness again. Yet sometimes, under the moon's pale glow, I swear I can still hear that unholy totem's roar. I survived, but the memories cling to me like a curse, reminding me that some doors should remain forever closed.